Good afternoon, everyone. Can all of our colleagues online hear us okay?
Good afternoon, everyone.
I didn't catch that.
She said good afternoon, everyone.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon. All right, we'll call the Monday, June 29th, 2020 City of Homestead Ad-Hoc Charter Review Committee meeting to order. And due to COVID-19, this will be a virtual Ad Hoc Charter Review Committee meeting. The city has accepted public comments as part of the meeting, which comments were emailed to publiccomments@cityofhomestead.com. The comments will be made part of the record and included in the minutes. Public comments could be submitted up to 24 hours prior to this meeting and were limited to 300 words per comment. Any comments must provide the name and address of the submitter for the record. All right, thank you all for being here. For the record, Mr. Maldonado is absent, as is Mr. Booker, but we have a quorum of 5 of the 7 appointees, and Matthew Pearl, our city attorney, is with us. Do we have a motion for approval of the June 22nd, 2020 committee meeting minutes?
Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Craig.
As you always, Ms. Sewell and her team does a great job. Upon reviewing the minutes, I found there were 5 places in which the word protective was used instead of the word protected. As I recall, we were discussing a possible protected class of candidates. There were 1 place on page 2 of the minutes, 2 places on page 3 of the minutes, and 2 on page 4 of the minutes. I believe that instead of the word protective, the word should be protected.
Okay. We'll make note of that. Mr. Moss?
On page 2 of the minutes, if you would note, turn this on. Page 2 of the minutes on the first full paragraph up at the top. First of all, my name is just misspelled. It's actually 2 A's and 1 S. It's the only place I noticed. Everywhere else it's correct. But then if you go down about 5 lines where it says he pointed out they did not want term limits where somebody could come back and run again, it should have read where somebody could not come back and run again. In other words, we weren't asking for permanent term limits forever and ever. We wanted the 12 and then step away for 2 years and be able to come back and be able to run again. So just you insert the word not where it says where somebody could not.
Can anyone hear me?
Thank you. Was that it?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Burke.
Yes, Mr. Burke. Okay. So subject to those comments and corrections, is there anything further? Do we have a motion for approval subject to those changes?
So moved.
All right. We have a motion. We have a second by Mr. Guzman. Would anyone like to be recorded as a no vote? None appearing. The minutes will be shown as unanimously approved. All right. So we have 2 items as a topic for discussion. First is the overview of the proposed charter questions. We have before us in our packet the proposed language that would be inserted into the charter together with the actual text of the proposed questions to be placed on the ballot. Before we begin, Mr. Pearl, did you have anything to add or any changes to make note of?
I would just speak to some of the things that we had discussed earlier, and I can direct just to those couple of points. In section 203D, per our conversation, section 4 states that a council member or interim mayor designs to resign their council seat with time remaining must notify the clerk no less than 30 days prior to the first day of election qualifying. And if we recall, that was so that we could work with the supervisor of elections to have the remainder of the term of that seat filled during that forthcoming election, as opposed to holding a special election. After speaking with the mayor, it suggested that we include a section 5, which basically mirrors the above section, but for an inverse, where the mayor, if the mayor wanted to resign with time remaining in his or her term to run for a council seat, that the same 30-day notice period would apply.
Okay. So since you and I have had the conversation and it's a little bit difficult for us here in the room to understand what you're saying, let me run that last, because I don't know, can you all hear me any better than you can hear Mr. Pearl? Well, I know you can, Julio. All right. At 2.03 D, and we would add subsection lowercase Roman numeral 5 to mirror what section 4 says, but it would be if in the event a mayor were going to resign midterm to run for a council seat, it would impose upon the person holding the mayor's seat the same obligation to give notice of the intent to resign as a predicate to being eligible to run for a council seat in the upcoming election. And I believe we had those conversations, particularly in light of if in the event the four-year term for mayor is approved, that could be a possibility. Maybe not likely, but it is possible. If the 4 year right now with a 2 year term, it would by necessity not apply because during every election cycle, the mayor's seat is up for election, so there would not be a need for the sitting mayor to provide that notice.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Craig?
if I understand this, in subsection 5 would read, a mayor desiring to resign from his or her council seat with time remaining in his or her term in order to run for a council seat must notify the city clerk in writing of his or her intent no less than 30 days prior to the first day of the election qualifying period for the next mayoral election. Is that correct?
That's correct. We, rather than addressing council member as we do in subsection 4 as it's presented, subsection 5 would be added to address in the event the mayor was going to run for council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on that addition? Is anyone opposed to having that addition placed in the charter language for ultimate approval? Okay. Mr. Pearl, you want to go ahead with the next section? Was there anything there?
There was nothing in the next section.
All right.
We get to section 205D, vacancy in the office of mayor or vice mayor.
All right, that's 2.05, D is in Daniel, 3.
3, correct.
Right.
Two minor changes, nothing changing the substance. The first would be following the sentence that says, or a vacancy is created in the vice mayor's council seat, comma, it would say by rather than or the resignation or the refusal to accept the position of vice mayor. And then in the second to last line, a clarification on the position of vice mayor shall be filled by the council member receiving the next highest number of votes. Following that, the word vote would be included for the office of vice mayor, so that it's clarified, so it's not the highest number of votes for the council seat, the highest number of votes for the office of vice mayor, since everyone would be on the ballot.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the committee on that? Did someone want to chime in? I heard something. No? Okay. Next section.
No change to the next section. There's no change until you get down to section 9.05, which is really just the transitional provisions and not the text of the charter. And I think that the changes in the transitional provisions in B and C, we can remove all together. They'll become effectual. If those changes are adopted, they will take effect upon adoption, and those we don't necessarily specify for the positions relating to the 21 election. They'll just become they'll become effective upon adoption. There's no special transition necessary.
So, Matt, and again, you were really breaking up here. As I understand
I
it,
apologize. I'm trying to do it through the phone.
okay, 9.05, we would propose to strike B and C, and it would only be 9.05A. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Does the committee have any questions, comments, or concerns on the amended language proposed to be inserted into the charter? Do we have a motion?
I think clarifications are helpful.
Start over again, Mr. Craig.
I'm just going to compliment Matthew at the clarifications and reductions and substitutions do clarify and are helpful.
I didn't catch the flavor of your last comment there, Mr. Craig.
He done good.
Okay. Yes, yes, he did. Thank you. All right. So is that your motion to approve the proposed charter language?
So moved.
All right. Do we have a second? I have a second by Mr. Moss. Any further discussion before we vote on approving the language as amended? Would anyone wish to be recorded as a no vote? All right, then the language as amended by the discussion here today is approved. Moving on, we have the 9 actual questions that will be, assuming they're approved by council. These are what we propose the actual ballot questions will look like. Anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns? They're in the order of the question follows the order in which those issues are found in the charter. Do we have a motion to approve the language, the form of questions to submit to council for approval? Moved by Mr. Guzman.
Second.
Second by Mr. Craig. Any further questions, comments, or discussion? Anyone wish to be recorded as a no vote? None appearing. The questions will be reflected as unanimously approved. Moving on to the recommendations that we want to forward to council at this point. I believe there are three. The first would be the issue we discussed previously, encouraging them to enact an ordinance providing that the procedure used in the event of the failure of a mayoral appointment will be the procedure that was most recently used. Second, that the committee be allowed to continue to function and go forward with additional issues with a notation that these were, arguably some of the most pressing and current issues, and in the interest of time, we wanted to move these forward. And thirdly, I hope all of you got my rambling narrative on the adjustment of the boundary lines between the Northwest seat, seat 1, and the Malibu Bay / Waterstone seat, which I believe is seat 5. And that would be to back that line up from where it currently meets the Malibu Bay development back to Farm Life Road. Do we have that map available to put up on the screen? We're going to try to do a screen share to give you a visual of that. You'll see the yellow, the lighter yellow is what we commonly refer to as the Northwest seat, or seat 1. And as I discussed, and the blue is Malibu Bay and Waterstone, seat 5. Mr. Moss will remember, and as I discussed in my narrative, District 1 has remained unchanged since it was drawn back in 2002. And there's been additional development, and really just by necessity, that's where those lines needed to be drawn. And I would submit that based upon geographic factors, common interest, so forth, many of the factors we relied upon, that those portions of seat 1 lying east of Farm Life Road be transferred to the Waterstone residential area seat. Certainly, for me, it makes more sense that these are clearly east side residents, and those were some of the considerations in place. An additional issue for bringing this forward, in case I didn't make it clear, is that district boundaries at this point are changed by ordinance. But we put a safeguard in place in 2002 that in order to avoid, quote, politics being played, that the boundary lines could not be changed within 1 year of a qualifying date. So we have a drop dead date for the council to do this by qualifying in August. So we need to get this before council, but this will not prevent any potential candidate who's in that area from running for office, because those residents that may be there now would have the opportunity to pursue the Malibu Bay seat. But my concern is just that in terms of geography and type of housing and just the issues that different residents face being on east side versus west side, that it would be more appropriate to have that area included for the coming election and thereafter in the Waterstone seat. So I'd love to hear some feedback.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Guzman.
Thank you. When I look at that map and I try to understand, I got your email and I understand what you're describing in the email and the rationale behind it. But when you consider the council person representing the Waterstone area, most of those houses in Waterstone are in gated communities, and that particular council member understands the dynamics that go with being in a gated community. When you get west of the turnpike, it's a completely different style of home. So I think that the person in the northwest seat better understands the people who live on the west side of the turnpike, which is what I consider still a better representation of the people who live there. And there's not a lot of there's not a lot of households in that small area that you've selected. Now, I don't know if there's new developments being built in there, if they've been.
There is.
Yeah?
There is.
So is there a,
Here's my biggest concern, is that there is the potential for the west side, the true west side, to not have representation that actually lives on the west side.
so the true west side of Homestead to not have representation, your statement was?
I deem east-west sort of US 1. And in the day that we did it, Sky Vista was kind of hanging out there by itself. It really didn't fit anywhere other than seat 1. But we're looking at, I counted about 42 new homes in one of the areas, and based upon extrapolating that other, it looks like there's the potential for probably another 120 to 150. I'm not so sure that they're not in gated communities. Even so, certainly in terms of traffic and location and so forth, and the issue that the biggest rationale behind the establishment of residential area seats was that all true areas were ensured some geographic representation, and I think there's a real risk there. And as we go forward, there are some of those issues between the villages and the southwest seat. I don't see them as pressing or the ability to fairly make those changes at this point, that this cycle would be the time to fairly make those changes. Not that numbers of population or of household are determinative, but I make note that we've seen Redland Reef come online on the west side, which looks to me like it's a pretty close balance with what would be given up that wasn't there when these lines were drawn. And of course, we're looking at even further west in the future, probably another 400 to the far west. So that would tend to create a population balance. But for me, the biggest issue is the neighborhood of someone who could potentially be elected to that seat, the geographic location.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Do we have data on number of residents in each location on hand?
And for each of the districts?
Or I guess we could say, since we're talking about Northwest and Waterstone, Malibu Bay, do we have that information available?
How current is it? We don't. And again, while it is one factor to be determined in drawing these districts, it's not as nearly as determinative as it would be if we had truly single member. Because bear in mind that the entire city votes on every district.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I just don't think that a council member who lives in the Waterstone, Malibu Bay district really understands how the other people live on the other side of the turnpike. That's what my position is.
Well, but you've got this little notch area that runs from Farm Life to the turnpike. It's really kind of in a limbo area. Newer housing, east side traffic issues. Potentially, those neighborhoods probably will be gated. And certainly there's a little notch of Homestead that's called Waterstone, that's not really Waterstone, that faces 137th Avenue that is not gated either. Yes, did I hear Ms. Mallory try to chime in? Mr. Craig, was
Yeah,
that?
the sound was awful. I was just gonna actually speak into the mic.
Could you run that by us again?
Yes, sir, ma'am. The sound was a little awful. I was gonna suggest that you gentlemen into the mic.
No, didn't get it.
We can't hear you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we're having a hard time. Is Ms. Mallory trying to tell us she can't hear us, or is she trying to add a comment?
She's trying to tell you we can't hear you.
Oh, well, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Craig.
all right, I'm sorry. I'll
Mr.
try
Mayor.
to, Mr. Craig?
I have two questions. How many, clarify for me, how many current city council members would these changes affect?
None. Because both seats will stand for election in the coming year, in the coming cycle. And the area that I'm addressing are new residents who have, up to this point, never had the opportunity to run for office because those houses haven't even been there for a year.
So in effect, we're recommending to the city council to adopt these?
We are in effect asking the city council to move the far eastern portions of seat 1 that are just now being developed to include them into the boundaries of seat 5.
And therefore, it will be up to the city council to make the decision whether to take this recommendation or not.
That's correct. This is not a charter issue per se, but it goes hand in hand with charter work.
But I'm fine with presenting it to the city council.
And again, this is just a recommendation, and it would be by ordinance. It would have to go forward. Mr. Guzman? Anything else?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
would it be possible to have a visual depiction of that? I'm looking at, trying to, I see where the 1 in 5 are, but I'm trying to understand what the new areas in 1 are going to be. And there's another issue, there's been an split in C2. I mean, literally up and down 152, there's so much construction and multi-family units going in there. It seems to me we're going to have to redo all of this if we're going to look at populations and spreading the population fairly and evenly out without gerrymandering.
Well, population is just one issue, and certainly the districts to the east are going to be, by necessity, far more populous than those to the west. My personal biggest concern has always been is that someone who's really an east side homesteader, who would never have potentially any reason to go west of US 1, could potentially represent Northwest Homestead, and my fear is really leave it without representation. We're not trying to disenfranchise anybody. The voters in whichever district these voters end up in the coming year, whether they're in the light yellow or in the blue, they will have the opportunity to seek office in the coming cycle. We're not delaying the right of anyone to seek office. But,
So
and to
we're
your,
essentially just talking about the area.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. So we're just talking about the area in C1 that is east of Route 1.
No. This is for the area only east of Farm Life and north of 8th Street.
Right, okay. I got you.
The racetrack gas station north of there, north and east of the new self-storage facility, the property behind Richard's Tractor, up behind Campbell Middle School. Sky Vista, that's on the east side, would remain in Seat 1 in the Northwest District.
Okay, I see it much better now. Thank you for-
Okay, so we're only talking about that area east of Farm Life Road. Better view now of the map? All right, Mr. Burke, did you have anything further?
No, I actually had to go and find my house because I live off of Farm Life to try to figure out where you were talking about. But by making it larger, now I absolutely see it.
Okay, all right. That would be, what's referred to Northeast 18th Avenue. Right. So, do we have any further comments or a
Mr.
motion to
Mayor?
forward the recommendation?
Mr. Mayor, has Homestead ever had single-member districts?
It has not. Until the election of '03, it was an purely at-large system.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Craig.
if we, in effect, forward this to the city council, does this indicate that we approve of this or that we just want city council to consider it?
It's a recommendation that the council consider it, to bring it to their
Thank you.
attention to address before the August deadline.
As long as it's up, just for consideration and does not imply that we are unanimous in approving these changes, then I so move that we forward it to the city council for their consideration.
Okay, so it would
I'll
be
second
the package of 3 recommendations: that we continue our work, that they adopt the procedure in the event of an appointment if the mayor's nominee doesn't get approved, and that those lines be adjusted for the coming, in time for the coming election. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Craig. Did you second it?
I'll second
Yeah, I think we
that.
got a second. Okay, and Mr. Guzman has a question.
East of Farm Life Road to where it says Newton Road. That's where Racetrack is. That's where Kelly Tractor. That's where a lot of those large parcels are. There's not very much residential in.
Well, no, there is, and when you look there at the Northeast 10th Court and 9th Court, and where it says the Southwest 3100 block, it's really a checkerboard over there of what's county and what's city, but there are about 45 lots already platted, and I believe there's been some preliminary approvals over the years, not only in that area, but to the area west of Newton Road, between Farm Life and Newton. If you pay attention, there's some pretty significant acreage to the north of Richard's Tractors, and to the northwest of the school and the Water Management District office that is master plan for residential.
Are any, in that master plan, is there any high density in there for example, townhomes or condos? Or is it all just single-family
I
homes?
can't say with certainty. I know that what's been approved now, when you go on the county website and look at the platted lots, they appear to be similar to the single-family homes lots that you would find in Malibu and Waterstone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any further questions? All right, then who among you would like to be recorded as a no on this motion?
I'd like to be recorded as a no.
Now, so the minutes can reflect that, is that, we've lumped all three recommendations together.
Oh.
Is your no with respect to the boundary change?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we don't have a second for this motion.
Yeah, I think I had a second from somebody online. Mr. Burke, did you second that?
It was Mr. Craig who moved it.
I know Mr. Craig moved it. Who seconded it?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Burke seconded, yes, okay.
Thank you.
All right, so the motion passes 4-1, right? 4-1. All right, Mr. Pearl, do we need to come back next week and wave our magic wand one more time over the changes, or are we good?
I'm good if you're good. Unless there's something else that you want to discuss, we can move forward with the changes as presented tonight.
With the caveat that it would be difficult to get anything else before council that we discuss from this point forward, I'd be happy to meet again next week if the committee wanted to do so. But this will be the package that goes forward to the council for potential placement on the November ballot. But I'm more than happy to continue working. So, Madam Clerk, let's go ahead and notice a meeting for next Monday at 5:30. And if committee members wouldn't mind, if you want to submit what you would like to address or any concerns you have, submit them to Michelle, my assistant, Michelle Wells, and we'll put an agenda together for next week and the coming weeks. So there's nothing further. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Craig.
Mr. Mayor? I'd like to address Mr. Guzman just for a moment, please.
Sure.
I understand the reservations, Mr. Guzman, but my feeling about this was we are not recommending this. We are just forwarding it to the city council for their consideration. So I'm so confused about your no vote.
Mr. Guzman, if I might jump in if I misspeak. We are sending a package of recommendations forward, 3 recommendations under one motion. And I suspect that had we split those, he would have voted in the affirmative on continuing the work of the committee, adopting the procedure for council voting on the filling of a vacancy, and would have voted in the negative on the recommendation to move the line. Is that correct, Mr. Guzman?
That is correct.
He's nodding in the affirmative that my characterization is correct.
Well, again, my question is, we were not recommending that the lines be changed. We were asking for the city council to consider it. Those are 2 different things.
Understood, Mr. Craig. However, the city council relies on this committee to provide our feedback and how we feel about certain items that are presented before us. So my position on moving the boundary is simply stating that the representative living on the east of the turnpike, in my opinion, isn't considered, in my opinion, the best representative for people who reside on the west of the turnpike. Only because I think there's 2 different styles of homes, and given that they live in gated communities and have clubhouses and things like that, the people that live on the west side typically don't have those style of homes, and that's where I see the difference. Thank you.
I may agree with your analysis, but again, I thought we made it clear to the city council that we were not recommending that these changes be made. We were just asking the city council to consider these changes. I don't want to go on record of saying that I completely recommend and approve of the proposed changes, but I would like city council to take a look at them.
Well, in simplest terms, our months of work is nothing more than a recommendation to council. You know, they as a body are potential have the full authority and ability to decline placing any number of charter initiatives on the ballot or making significant changes. They can, you know, just as with the recommendations, they can choose to ignore or take their own path. All right. They are the ones who have, well, let me back up. I don't know that the boundary change would be on anyone's radar but for this discussion that is related to charter issues. And that's why I brought it before this committee.
I suggest, Mr. Guzman, that you and I make clear to the city council when this comes before them, our reasoning behind forwarding the boundary recommendations.
You know, I really think that's splitting hairs, with all due respect. You know, if you think that area that I'm talking about should remain in the Northwest and put the Northwest at risk of not having someone who lives on the true west side of town, that's fine. But let's look at your backyard. Let's put the Southwest in the Keys Gate section and see what you think about that. So, you know what? To make it clear, let's go back and vote on them one at a time, Mr. Craig. I think it's really splitting hairs, and I want to be very clear, and I don't want anybody to have any discord when we all come before council with these proposals. So let me go back and ask for a motion to approve the recommendation of this board to council that the council adopt by ordinance the election procedure that was utilized earlier this year to select a council member in the event the mayor's nominee is declined. All right, so it's been moved by Mr. Guzman. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, second by Ms. Mallory. Any further discussion on the procedural recommendation? Would anyone wish to be recorded as a no vote? All right. We'll note that the procedural recommendation of this committee to council passed unanimously. The second recommendation from this committee would be more in the term of a request that this committee be allowed to continue to function, to continue a review and a discussion of charter issues in light of our delays with COVID. Now, do we have a motion? Moved by Mr. Guzman.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Moss. Any further discussion? Okay, would anyone like to be reflected as a no vote? All right, this recommendation passes to council unanimously. Now let me very carefully and clearly, my request to this board was that it be in the form of a recommendation to move the boundary, to make the eastern boundary of the council seat numbered 1 at the dividing line of Farm Life Road, Northeast 18th Avenue, such as that portion of seat 1 lying east of Farm Life Road would be included in the confines of seat 5. That was my request to this body.
Mr. Mayor, may I comment?
Sure, Mr. Moss.
Having been born and raised down here, when I think of the northwest section, I think of the area where my office building is. I think of everything west of US 1. I understand that this area encompasses some areas east of US 1. It's almost like seat 1 could be in two different parts. You have a 1A and a 1B. Everything east of US 1 and everything west of US 1. When I get closer to the turnpike, whether it be right up against it on the west or the east, to me that area over there has always been and remains to be a bit foreign. I mean, I go to the Kohl's Shopping Center. That's about that's where a lot of the restaurants are and places like that. And so we go over there, but every time I go there, I feel like I'm going into a different world. And the closer that you get to that shopping center, the closer that you get to Lowe's, which is the 162nd Avenue, the further east you go, even though maybe the houses are single-family houses or that, the whole area has a different feel and a different complex than the west side of US 1, which is the reason why I tended to agree that the little piece is more attuned to what is east of the turnpike than it is what is west of US 1 and has always been known as the northwest section. That's just my feeling, but either way, I just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. Any further questions or comments from the committee? Is there anyone who would like to move the recommendation, which would be a recommendation to council to adjust the boundary line?
I'll make the motion.
Moved by Mr. Moss. Do we have a second? No second. All right. So,
Sorry, I couldn't reach my button. I'll second it.
okay, so is that a second for Mr. Burke?
Yes, it is.
All right. So, would anyone other, pardon me for making an assumption here. We're online, I'll try to make it easy. Is there anyone in addition to Mr. Guzman and Mr. Craig who would like to be recorded as a no vote on this matter?
I'd like to be recorded as a no vote on this matter.
Okay. So then that is a 3-2 failure. All right. Thank you all. All right. I think this is one of those issues that would have been better addressed in person. We're under some real time constraints, and I'm not going, I will not go behind your back, but as mayor, I will put this under my business on the July agenda for consideration, which will occur after the committee presentation by special call. Clearly, we're going to note that this did not go forward, but I'm going to use my prerogative as mayor and as the first holder of seat 1, the northwest seat, and very protective of my community. I am going to put this under my business, and again, not seeking to undermine you. This will go forward. This recommendation or the disclosure of the recommendation of the committee against that will go forward prior to my presentation to council. So, are there any further comments, or do we have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Guzman to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Second by Ms. Mallory. Thank you all. We will see you next week. Meeting adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Be safe.
You too.
Bye. Be safe.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website at www